In the heart of a war zone, where danger hides behind every corner, two dogs are about to become the lifeline for hundreds. This is the story of Arco and Luna, heroes who risk everything to save lives when bombs rain down on a hospital. Stay with us to witness courage beyond duty. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. The early morning sun struggled to break through the grey clouds over a city worn down by months of conflict. Amidst shattered buildings and silent streets, one place remained a fragile sanctuary, a hospital where the wounded sought safety and hope. Inside the hospital, the air was thick with tension and quiet determination. Soldiers moved carefully, carrying stretchers and supplies. Medics whispered urgent prayers as they tended to the injured. Among them was Sergeant Ivan, a man hardened by war, but gentle with those under his care. At his side was Arco, a sharp-eyed German shepherd, trained for one mission: to protect and save. Ivan ran his fingers through Arco's fur, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath. "Today's just another day, boy," he murmured, "but we both know anything can happen." Nearby, in a sunlit corner of the ward, Luna, a calm and compassionate Labrador, rested beside a group of young soldiers. Her soft eyes and warm presence brought fleeting moments of peace to those haunted by the horrors outside. Captain Petro, the unit commander, paced near the hospital entrance. His eyes scanned the horizon, shadowed with smoke from distant shelling. "You?" He turned to Ivan. "The fighting is getting closer. The enemy knows this hospital is vital. If they strike here, it'll be a disaster." A low rumble shook the ground. The calm was breaking. Ivan tightened his grip on Arco's leash, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down. They were ready. But would it be enough? The hospital was a place of quiet hope in a city scarred by relentless conflict. It was a sanctuary carved from chaos, where doctors and soldiers battled every hour to save lives, yet none could escape the shadow of war, looming ever closer. On this morning, the light filtering through dusty windows cast long, pale beams across the stone floors. The air was heavy, thick with antiseptic sweat, and the faint metallic tang of blood. Medics moved silently among rows of wounded, their faces worn, but resolute. Sergeant Ivan stood near the entrance, eyes scanning the horizon. Beside him, Arco shifted, muscles taut, and ears flicking, as if sensing a storm beyond sight. Ivan could feel the dog's unease, a silent warning in the air. "Stay alert," Ivan whispered to Arco. "Something's coming." Nearby, Luna lay quietly beside a group of soldiers, her soft brown eyes reflecting their exhaustion and fear. She gently rested her head on the lap of a young recruit who was shaking silently. Her presence was a balm, a fragile thread of calm in the swirling tempest of war. Suddenly the distant rumble began, low and ominous. Conversation stopped, heads turned toward the growing noise, a warning that something terrible was approaching. Captain Petro burst into the ward, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "All teams prepare for possible bombardment. Secure the wounded and brace for impact." The hospital staff moved with practiced urgency, but beneath their professional exterior was the raw pulse of fear. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Soldiers steadied their trembling hands. Ivan gripped Arco's collar, feeling the dog's heartbeat sync with his own. Then, without warning, the world exploded. The first bomb struck just beyond the hospital's walls, shaking the ground like an angry giant stamping its feet. Windows exploded outward, glass spraying like deadly rain. Walls cracked, plaster crumbling, and dust erupting into thick clouds. Ivan's ears rang as a second blast tore through the adjacent wing, collapsing walls and sending chunks of rubble crashing to the floor. A scream, sharp, terrified, cut through the chaos. "Move, get out of the open," Ivan shouted, voice hoarse. Arco was already pulling forward, nose to the ground, instincts driving him toward the wounded trapped beneath the wreckage. Inside the hospital, confusion reigned. Medics rushed to tend to the injured, some wounded by falling debris. Soldiers tried to keep order, their shouts mixing with cries of pain. Luna moved calmly through the chaos, offering comfort to those she could reach. Her soft eyes met a frightened mother clutching her baby, and the dog rested her head gently against the woman's trembling hands. Outside, the shelling continued, relentless, unforgiving. Ivan knelt beside Arco, feeling the dog's tense muscles as he followed a faint scent. "Good boy, find them," Ivan urged. The dog led them into a collapsed corridor where bricks and timber lay in chaotic piles. A faint noise, a whimper barely audible, echoed from beneath the rubble. Ivan's heart slammed in his chest. "Hold on, we're coming." Moko began digging, claws scraping against stone and dust filling the air. Time slowed to agonizing seconds as Ivan called for help, voice breaking with urgency. Suddenly, a small hand emerged, trembling and pale. "Here!" Ivan yelled, his voice raw. Luna arrived, her warm breath washing over the child, calming them with gentle licks and soft whines. The rescue was only beginning. The air was thick with dust, the acrid smell of smoke mixing with the scent of antiseptic and blood. The hospital corridors, once orderly and calm, were now choked with panic and confusion. Nurses shouted over the chaos, trying to organize the evacuation and tend to the wounded, but their voices were swallowed by the roar of shelling and crumbling walls. Ivan wiped sweat and grime from his brow, eyes never leaving Arko, who was relentless in his search. The dog's powerful paws clawed through the rubble with urgent precision, his nose twitching at every scent, every tiny trace of life beneath the destruction. Ivan's mind raced back to their training days, cold mornings, spent running drills through simulated rubble fields, obedience tests under extreme stress, and the long hours building trust. He remembered the day he first met Arko, a fierce pup with a bright spark in his eyes, eager to please, but full of raw energy. Over time that spark grew into something fierce and steady, a partnership built on unspoken understanding. Arko's not just a dog, Ivan thought, he's a brother, a guardian. Nearby, Luna moved through the hospital ward like a gentle shadow, her calm presence anchoring the terrified souls around her. She nuzzled a young soldier's hand, coaxing a weak smile from his pale face. The boy's eyes, once wide with fear, softened for a moment. The soldier whispered, "Thank you, Luna, for not letting me give up." Luna's tail thumped softly, a quiet promise to stay by his side. Outside, the bombardment continued. Every explosion sent tremors through the ground, threatening to bring down more of the fragile building. Dust and smoke clawed at Ivan's throat, but he forced himself to keep breathing, keep moving. Suddenly a scream shattered the din, a woman's cry, desperate and raw. Ivan turned to see a mother clutching her injured child, her face streaked with tears and dust. Luna moved to her side instantly, laying her head gently against the woman's arm. The child's small body was limp, bruised from the blast. Face sighed. "Jenston, well, get you help," Ivan said, voice shaking but firm. "Stay close." They sighed. Arko barked sharply, pulling Ivan's attention back to the corridor. The dog's nose was pressed to the ground, tracking something deeper within the wreckage. Ivan followed, heart pounding in his chest. Every step was a risk. The floor beneath creaked, ominously, cracked tiles shifting underfoot. They reached a pile of debris, large chunks of concrete and splintered wood blocking their path. Ivan signaled for reinforcements, but time was running out. The building groaned again, a warning that it could collapse at any moment. "Hold steady, boy," Ivan murmured to Arko. The dog began digging with renewed urgency, dust swirling around them like a choking cloud. Ivan felt the weight of every second, every breath, a chance to save or lose a life. From the rubble, a faint whimper broke through, a fragile thread of hope. Arko's tail wagged once, and Ivan dropped to his knees, hands trembling, as he helped clear the stones. At last a small face appeared, wide, scared eyes blinking in the dust. "Hold on, little one," Ivan whispered, tears stinging his eyes. Luna appeared beside them, her warmth and calm radiating like a shield. She nuzzled the child's cheek, her presence a soothing balm amidst the destruction. With careful hands and the help of nearby rescuers, they pulled the child free. "Daha!" The boy coughed, weak but alive. Ivan's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, the world seemed still. But then the building shuddered again. The storm was far from over. The dust thickened, settling like a suffocating blanket over the ruins of the hospital wing. The air felt charged, each breath sharp and heavy, like inhaling the very smoke of despair. Ivan pressed his fingers to the child's wrist, feeling the faint flutter of life beneath the dirt and bruises. A fragile spark, but it was there. Behind him, the moans of the wounded echoed off cracked walls, creating a haunting chorus of pain and survival. Nurses scrambled past their uniforms, stained with blood, carrying stretchers and makeshift bandages. A medic shouted orders in a foreign tongue, but the urgency transcended language. Every person was fighting for seconds, for breath, for hope. Ivan looked up to see Luna gently lick the child's face, a soft reassurance in her amber eyes. The little boy's breathing steadied, slow but steady. "You're safe now, Ivan," whispered, voice breaking. Arko padded closer, the tension in his body still taut, but his eyes softer now. The dog glanced at Ivan, as if seeking confirmation they had found one, but there were others, trapped others, still breathing beneath this ruin. "Keep moving," Ivan commanded, quietly rising to his feet despite the tremor in his knees. The hospital's corridors were no longer recognizable floors, warped walls scarred with cracks, flickering lights casting eerie shadows. The echo of falling debris was constant, a grim reminder that the next collapse could come without warning. Ivan's boots crunched over shattered glass as he pushed deeper into the building, Arko at his heels, nose to the ground once more. Luna followed close behind, her keen senses alert to any whimper or faint heartbeat. The deafening roar of the bombing continued outside, punctuated by distant screams and the relentless wail of sirens. Suddenly, Ivan stopped. A faint, almost imperceptible noise, a weak cough of breath, came from under a heap of twisted metal near the nurse's station. "Inijis, 9-day sand. Arko here," Ivan called drummer. The dog's ears perked. He dove into the rubble, claws scrabbling for purchase amid the debris. Dust stung Ivan's eyes and throat as he hurried to assist. Together they began to clear away the fallen fragments, careful not to cause further injury. From beneath the wreckage emerged the battered form of an older woman, a nurse, her uniform torn and smeared with blood but alive. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy, and filled with confusion and pain. "Help! Help the others!" she gasped, voice trembling. Ivan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "We will. Stay with us." Luna gently nuzzled the nurse's hand, a quiet promise of protection. As they worked, Ivan's mind flickered to the countless stories he had heard about these dogs, how they were trained not only for war, but for the sacred task of saving lives. It wasn't just their strength or speed, it was their heart, their unyielding loyalty. In that moment, with the building threatening to fall apart around them, Ivan realized the truth of it. These dogs were not just tools of war, they were heroes. The ground shook violently again. A fresh blast ripped through the hospital's east wing, sending a cloud of dust and debris swirling into the air. Nurses screamed and patients cried out as the building trembled on the brink of collapse. "Vuelvan!" Ivan grabbed Arko's collar, tightly shouting, "We have to get out now." Luna barked sharply, urging the wounded and rescuers toward the exit. But escape was not simple. The main hallway was blocked by fallen beams and rubble, forcing them to find another way. Guided by Arko's keen nose, Ivan led the group through a narrow side corridor, dodging hazards and helping those who stumbled. Each step was a gamble. The sound of creaking beams overhead was a constant threat. "Guide with Akoru." A young soldier clutching his bleeding arm faltered. Luna was immediately at his side, pressing her body against his to steady him. "Come on, soldier," Ivan urged, "you're strong, just a little further." The soldier nodded, tears mixing with the dirt on his face. Outside, Ivan caught sight of more explosions lighting the skyline. The war was consuming everything in its path. As they neared the exit, a sudden collapse blocked their way, forcing them to double back. The chaos was overwhelming, but Ivan felt a fierce resolve burning inside him. Every life mattered. Every breath was a victory. They pressed on. The narrow corridor twisted and turned, its walls cracked and crumbling. The ceiling was unstable. Every step echoed with a low groan warning of collapse. Dust hung thick like a fog, making it hard to breathe. But Ivan pushed on, his heart pounding like a drumbeat in the silence between explosions. Arko stayed close, a steady presence in the chaos. His sharp eyes scanned every shadow, his nose twitching as he hunted for the faintest sign of life. Ivan marveled at how the dog never wavered, fearless, determined, driven by something beyond instinct. Behind them, Luna moved with graceful urgency, her soft whimpers comforting the wounded around her. The young soldier steadied earlier, walked with a limping but firm pace, his gaze fixed ahead as if drawing strength from her quiet companionship. Suddenly a faint cry pierced the smoke, a high-pitched, desperate plea for help. It came from the floor below. Ivan's breath hitched. "Basement," he muttered. Without hesitation, he led the group to a stairwell descending into darkness. The steps were slick with water and dust, the air growing colder and heavier with each flight. Shadows danced in the flickering light of Ivan's flashlight, revealing broken medical supplies and overturned furniture. At the bottom the cry grew louder, a child's voice trembling and scared. "Here," Ivan said, kneeling as Arko bounded forward. The dog's nose pressed against a collapsed door, his paws scratching frantically at the rubble. Ivan called for help on his radio, but the signal was weak, swallowed by the concrete walls. "Hold on, little one," Ivan whispered, his fingers digging into the debris. Luna circled the stairwell entrance, alert and watchful. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then through the dust and silence came a tiny cough. Ivan's heart surged. He dug faster, sweat streaming down his face. Finally, a small hand emerged, pale and trembling. Ivan grasped it gently, pulling free a boy no older than 6, his eyes wide with fear but alive. The child's breath was ragged, and his clothes were torn, but he clung tightly to Ivan's neck, sobbing silently. Luna nuzzled the boy's cheek, her warmth a beacon of hope. Ivan looked up and saw tears in the eyes of his fellow rescuers. In that moment, amidst the rubble and ruin, a fragile thread of light cut through the darkness. Outside, the sky was streaked with smoke and fire, the distant thrum of artillery, a grim soundtrack. Ivan carried the boy up the stairs, each step heavier than the last but fueled by purpose. As they emerged into the hospital courtyard, Luna and Arko flanked him protectively, their bodies tense but proud. Paramedics rushed forward, taking the boy and the wounded into their care. Ivan stood back for a moment, chest-heaving eyes fixed on the shattered building. He thought of the lives lost, the suffering endured, but also of the lives saved and the silent heroes who made it possible. Arko nudged his hand with a wet nose. "We did it, boy," Ivan said softly. "We're not done yet." Luna barked in agreement, as if to say, "This fight is far from over." And Ivan knew as long as they stood together, as long as these dogs ran beside him, hope would never fade. As the dust settles on the shattered hospital, the battle is far from over. What does it take to heal a city torn apart, and the souls caught in the crossfire? Stay with us as we follow Ivan, Arko and Luna into the uncertain dawn, where every step could mean survival or sacrifice. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell to never miss the next chapter of these incredible stories of courage and hope. The early morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy grey clouds hovering over the city. The hospital courtyard, once a place of healing, now lay scarred, blackened patches of concrete, twisted metal, and the distant wail of sirens mixing with the cries of those left behind. Ivan sat on a cracked bench, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of borrowed coffee, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Arko rested his head on Ivan's knee, the dog's body still tense, but showing signs of relief. Luna lay nearby, alert but calm, her gaze scanning the horizon. The night's terror had left its mark on the building, on the people and on their souls. Ivan's mind replayed every moment. The deafening blast, the frantic search beneath the rubble, the small hand's head pulled free. But even as he thought of the lives saved, a gnawing ache took root for those lost, and for the wounds that ran deeper than the body. Nearby, a group of survivors huddled together, faces etched with grief and fatigue. Mothers cradled children, elderly men whispered prayers, and soldiers cleaned their weapons, eyes wary and distant. Luna rose, moving softly toward a young woman sitting alone on the ground. The woman's face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she clutched a tattered photograph. The dog nudged the photo with her nose, then looked up as if to say, "You're not alone." The woman's shoulders shook, and she reached out to stroke Luna's fur, drawing strength from the canine's steady presence. Ivan stood, taking a deep breath. Around him, the city was a fragile mosaic of pain and hope. The war had changed everything, but life pressed on. His phone buzzed a message from command. More missions ahead, more people depending on them. He looked down at Arko, then Luna, feeling a swell of pride and responsibility. They had faced the worst night imaginable, but their fight had only just begun. "Come on, team," Ivan said softly. "Let's get ready." Together they moved forward into the shadows of the aftermath, into the uncertain light of a new day. The morning air was heavy, with the scent of smoke and dust, a grim reminder of the night's horrors. As Ivan, Arko and Luna moved through the ruined hospital grounds, their footsteps echoed amid the cracked walls and shattered glass. Every corner they passed held a story, whispered cries, desperate prayers, the remnants of shattered lives. Ivan's boots crunched over broken tiles, eyes scanning for any sign of survivors or danger. His chest tightened with the weight of responsibility. This was more than a mission now, it was a promise to the city, to the people, to the children who had lost so much. Wakery, a corner. A sudden sharp cry caught his attention. A young girl no older than 7 sat trembling near the entrance, clutching a ragged teddy bear. Her eyes were wide, glazed with fear, and tears streaked her dirty cheeks. Luna approached gently, tail wagging softly as if to calm the frightened child. The girl reached out hesitantly, placing a tiny hand on Luna's fur. The dog's warmth and steady presence brought a flicker of comfort. Ivan knelt beside the girl. "It's okay. You're safe now." The girl nodded but didn't speak. Her silence spoke volumes. "Where's your family?" Ivan asked softly. She shook her head, eyes fixed on the ground. Ivan glanced at Arko, who sat alert but calm, his gaze steady. The dog's presence was a silent reassurance, a protector in a world gone dark. Together they led the girl to a nearby tent, where medical personnel triaged the wounded. Nurses wrapped her in a clean blanket, offering water and gentle smiles. Over too, Ivan's mind drifted to the others, the countless men, women and children, still trapped or missing. Each minute counted, each second was precious. The Pankelsein Genges, the Pantor. He checked his radio. Static filled the air, but faint voices broke through. Other rescue teams reporting progress, calling for backup, confirming safe zones. The city's heartbeat was fragile, but alive. Hours passed in a blur of motion. Ivan and the dogs worked tirelessly, Arko sniffing out hidden survivors, Luna comforting the injured and lost. They pulled a young man from beneath a collapsed ceiling beam, his leg pinned and bleeding. With teamwork and determination, they lifted the debris, easing him free. "Thank you," he whispered, eyes moist with gratitude. Ivan smiled faintly. "We're not done yet." Replics began to fall, a sudden tremor rippled through the ground. A distant explosion shattered the fragile calm, sending birds into frantic flight. Ivan's breath caught. The war had not relented. But neither had they. Luna barked sharply, alerting Ivan to movement near a damaged wing. He followed, heart pounding. In the shadows, a faint whimper, a child's voice, weak but unmistakable. Arko surged forward, digging through rubble with desperate urgency. "Keep going, boy," Ivan urged. Minutes later, the dust cleared to reveal a small face, dirt-smudged, but alive. Ivan lifted the boy carefully, feeling the fragile warmth of life held within trembling arms. In that moment, Ivan understood the true power of hope, fragile, fierce, and unstoppable. As night cloaked the city, the trio prepared for what lay ahead. The battle for survival was far from over, but together they were unstoppable. The air hung thick with the acrid smell of smoke and scorched earth. Flames licked the edges of collapsed buildings, sending tendrils of orange light spiraling into the smoky dusk. The city was a battlefield, and Ivan could feel the tension pulse through his veins like electricity. Arko was on high alert, his ears twitching at every distant boom, his nostrils flaring as he searched the air for danger. Luna paced beside Ivan, her keen eyes scanning the shadows, ready to protect. Tonight, they were not just rescuers, they were warriors stepping into the very heart of chaos. The command had been clear. A nearby shelter had taken a direct hit, and survivors were trapped inside the rubble. Time was running out. Ivan tightened his grip on his radio. "Team, move out. We're going in. Alaktir." The rubble was a maze of jagged concrete and twisted metal. Every step was precarious, every sound a potential threat. But Ivan moved steadily, driven by the cries echoing faintly beneath the debris. "Arko, find them," Ivan whispered. The dog's powerful nose led the way, digging and scratching, a blur of focused energy. Then a bark. A signal. "Babakanagiyad bahake." "Here," Ivan said, dropping to his knees. "Arkari." Luna joined in her paws, digging at the edge of a collapsed wall. The air beneath was stale but filled with faint signs of life. With careful coordination, the rescue team began to clear the rubble. Ivan's muscles burned sweat, mixed with grime on his face. But his eyes never left the spot where the trapped voices came from. Suddenly the ground trembled violently. Dust and debris rained down. "Move back," Ivan shouted. They scrambled out just as a secondary explosion rocked the ruins, sending a shockwave through the air. For a moment the world stood still. Then through the dust and noise, a tiny hand reached out. Ivan and the dog sprang into action. With heart pounding, Ivan pulled free a young woman, her face pale, but eyes alive with fear and hope. She gasped for air, clutching a small bundle, a newborn baby swaddled tightly against the cold. Luna licked the child's cheek gently, while Arko stood guard, ears perked for any sign of more danger. Ivan's breath caught. In that fragile moment, amidst the devastation and despair, life had won. But the fight was far from over. Ivan's arms trembled as he held the newborn close, the baby's faint cries piercing through the chaos. The woman, still weak, reached out her fingers, barely brushing Ivan's hand. Her eyes wide with exhaustion, yet burning with determination, locked onto his. We have to get out," she whispered, voice barely audible over the distant rumble of artillery fire. Ivan nodded, carefully rising. Luna pressed her body against the woman's legs, offering silent reassurance. Arko scanned the perimeter, muscles taut and ready for any sudden threat. Behind them, the once safe shelter was now a smoldering ruin. Flames crackled, sending sparks into the night sky. The air was thick with dust and the metallic scent of blood. Every step away from the wreckage was a victory, but the journey ahead was treacherous. The narrow streets were littered with debris, abandoned vehicles, and the shattered remnants of lives abruptly interrupted. Shadows danced on the walls as fires flickered, casting an eerie glow on the war-torn city. Suddenly a sharp crack echoed nearby, the unmistakable report of gunfire. Ivan's heart jumped. "Move," he shouted, urgency sharpening his voice. Luna and Arko reacted instantly, positioning themselves between Ivan and the source of danger. The dogs were his shield, their instincts honed by months of training and countless battles. A figure appeared from behind a crumbled wall, a young soldier, eyes wild with fear, clutching a rifle but visibly wounded. "Im hit," the soldier gasped, stumbling forward. Ivan rushed to his side, eyes flicking to the bleeding wound on the man's thigh. Blood seeped through torn fabric, the pain raw and immediate. "Hold on," Ivan said firmly, pulling out a first aid kit from his pack. Luna lay her head gently on the soldier's lap, her presence calming him despite the chaos. Arko kept watch, ears perked for further threats. Ivan tore open the bandages, pressing a clean cloth against the wound. "We need to get him to the medics," Ivan said, voice steady despite the pounding adrenaline. With help from the woman and the soldier himself, Ivan hoisted the injured man onto his shoulder. Luna and Arko flanked him as they navigated the perilous streets, moving as swiftly as the danger allowed. The city was alive with sounds of destruction, explosions in the distance, the shouts of soldiers, the sobs of civilians. Yet amid it all, a profound sense of purpose held Ivan steady. "Bauza Chalza Barbin Tas, Bauza Chalza Barbin Tas, Bauza Chalza Chalable." It was about holding on to humanity when everything threatened to unravel. The Barbin Tas. They reached a makeshift field hospital, tents illuminated by flickering lanterns and the glow of small fires. Medics and volunteers worked tirelessly, their faces streaked with dirt and determination. Ivan carefully lowered the soldier onto a cot. Nurses rushed forward, beginning urgent treatment. The woman, now cradling her newborn, found a quiet corner. Luna curled beside her protectively, her soft breaths a balm in the storm. Ivan stood for a moment, eyes closing briefly as exhaustion washed over him. But the war wasn't done with them yet. From outside, distant thunder signaled another wave of shelling was approaching. Ivan looked at Arko and Luna, their loyal faces mirroring his resolve. My elite. We have to keep moving," he said quietly. My elite. Because in this city of shadows and fire, every second was a battle. Every life saved was a beacon. And they were the light. The night grew colder, and the sounds of distant explosions continued their relentless rhythm like a grim heartbeat. Ivan wiped the sweat and grime from his brow as he stepped outside the tent, the weight of the newborn and the injured soldier still fresh in his mind. The city was cloaked in darkness, broken only by flickering fires, and the intermittent flare of artillery lighting up the sky like violent stars. Every shadow seemed alive with danger, yet Ivan knew that hesitation here would cost lives. "Luna, Arko," he whispered, crouching beside his loyal companions. Luna's amber eyes met his, filled with an almost human understanding, while Arkos' muzzle twitched as he sniffed the air, alert and ready. Ivan tightened the straps of his backpack and pulled his jacket closer. The mission wasn't over. There were others, survivors, trapped people still waiting for a hand to pull them from the wreckage. "Pack." The crackling voice on the radio interrupted the silence. "Ivan, we've located a group trapped in the eastern wing of the hospital ruins. They're running low on oxygen and time. Hence." Ivan's heart thudded harder. "Copy that. We're moving out." As they navigated the debris-strewn streets, Ivan's thoughts drifted to the family he had left behind miles away, his wife and young daughter. The risks were ever present, but the bonds he shared with Luna and Arko forged a new kind of family on the front lines. Suddenly a low moan pierced the night. Ivan froze, listening carefully. Arkos' ears twitched, and he bounded forward, nose to the ground. Luna followed, her body low, tail stiff. They reached a collapsed corridor, the rubble piled high like a concrete mountain. From beneath it, the muffled voices of trapped civilians fought through the debris. Ivan's pulse quickened. "Hold tight," he said, signaling the rescue team. Using heavy tools and raw strength, the team began removing chunks of concrete and twisted metal. The dogs circled, alert for structural shifts or any threat. Minutes passed like hours. Sweat dripped into Ivan's eyes as he worked alongside others. The team began removing 6. Then a gasp, the sound of air of life. The team began removing 6. The team began removing 6. 2 figures emerged, an elderly man clutching his wife, both shaken but alive. The man's eyes welled with tears as he looked at the rescue team. "Dengutin Citalis." "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. Luna nuzzled the woman's trembling hand, her warmth, a quiet comfort in the cold night. Ivan guided them to safety, his mind racing with the knowledge that many more awaited help. But the city was changing. The ground shook beneath them as a new wave of shelling began. The distant explosions grew closer, the thunderous blasts echoing through the streets. "Move, move," Ivan urged. The group sprinted through narrow alleys, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Ahead, an overturned bus offered momentary shelter. The survivors huddled inside, as Ivan and the dogs stood guard-eyes, scanning the dark horizon. Luna's body tensed. A sharp whistle from Ivan, and she dashed forward, barking fiercely. Ivan followed, spotting movement near a pile of rubble, a young boy no older than 10, trapped and coughing violently. Without hesitation, Ivan scrambled over the debris, calling softly to the child. "It's okay, I'm here," he soothed. The boy's eyes met his wide, terrified, but filled with hope. With careful hands, Ivan lifted the child to safety. Luna sniffed the boy, gently licking his cheek. Frary. The city around them seemed to hold its breath. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight pierced the smoky sky, painting the ruins in a surreal golden light. Ivan looked at his companions, Luna panting softly, Arko alert but calm, and felt a surge of pride and determination. They had survived another night in the firestorm. But their mission was far from over. Because in this war-torn city, every saved life was a victory. Every heartbeat a triumph of courage and love. And together, they were unstoppable. The orange glow of dawn seeped through the shattered windows of the battered ambulance, casting long shadows over the rubble-strewn streets. The acrid scent of smoke and gunpowder hung heavy in the cold morning air, mingling with the sharp tang of wet concrete and blood. Ivan sat quietly in the back of the vehicle, cradling the small boy rescued from the hospital rubble the night before. The child's shallow breaths were steady but weak, and every so often his eyelids fluttered, revealing the soft innocence beneath a face smudged with dust and tears. Luna rested her head on Ivan's knee, her warm eyes meeting his with a comforting glow. Beside her, Arko lay alert, but calm, ears twitching at every distant noise. The night's chaos was behind them, but Ivan knew the war's unforgiving grip was far from over. As the ambulance rumbled toward the next emergency site, Ivan's thoughts drifted to the families shattered by the relentless violence. Every rescued life was a victory, but every lost one was a wound in his soul. The radio crackled to life, breaking the silence. "Ivan, we've just received reports of a strike on the children's hospital in the north sector. There are still survivors trapped inside. Command is sending all available units. You're up." Ivan's jaw clenched and his breath hitched. "The children's hospital," he repeated under his breath. He looked down at the boy in his arms, eyes filled with pain and determination. "Hang on, little one," Ivan whispered. Outside, the city seemed to hold its breath as the ambulance sped toward the destruction. The scene at the hospital was a nightmare come to life. Flames licked the cracked walls, sending smoke spiraling into the sky. The air was thick with dust, screams, and the pounding rhythm of distant artillery. The hospital's facade was marred by gaping holes, windows shattered like broken promises. Ivan jumped from the ambulance, calling out to his team, "Prepare for extraction. We need to get everyone out fast." Luna and Arko surged ahead, noses to the ground, instincts sharp as knives. The dogs led Ivan through the debris-choked entrance, their steady presence a beacon in the suffocating darkness. Inside the hospital was chaos incarnate. Nurses carried children in their arms, faces pale but resolute. Doctors shouted orders over the cacophony, coordinating frantic evacuations. In a far wing, Ivan spotted the collapsed third floor, the site of the worst damage. He could hear the faint whimpers of those trapped beneath. Without hesitation, Ivan scrambled through the rubble, Luna and Arko flanking him, their breath visible in the cold, smoky air. His fingers grazed a small hand, trembling and weak. "Hold on, I'm coming," Ivan murmured, heart-pounding. With Luna's strength and Arko's alertness, the rescue was methodical. Each piece of debris shifted with care, each breath measured. One by one, he pulled children and nurses from the wreckage, each life a fragile thread weaving hope into the fabric of despair. But the war's fury was relentless. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the building. Dust and debris rained down, stinging eyes and choking lungs. Ivan was thrown to the ground, pain exploding through his ribs. Luna was immediately at his side, licking his face, her warm breath a balm against the harshness. Arko growled low, positioning himself between Ivan and the collapsing walls. The ceiling groaned ominously. "Everyone out," now Ivan yelled, voice hoarse. With the help of the remaining rescue team, they moved swiftly, carrying the wounded down unstable stairways. The hospital trembled beneath them, a monument to shattered lives. As they crossed the courtyard, another blast erupted, showering the ground with shards of glass and stone. Ivan shielded the child with his body, feeling the searing heat of the explosion nearby. When the dust settled, they were outside, gasping for fresh air. Around them, survivors huddled, tears and soot streaking their faces. A nurse clutched Ivan's arm, eyes wide with gratitude. "You saved them," she whispered. Ivan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Luna and Arko, despite exhaustion, stood firm guardians against the night. Hours later, as the city settled into uneasy silence, Ivan found a quiet moment. He knelt beside Luna, running his hand through her fur. "Wenjuzhen," she was stone. "You're a hero," he said softly. She looked up, eyes shining with a fierce loyalty. Arko nudged Ivan's shoulder, his own amber eyes tired but unyielding. Ivan looked out at the dawn breaking over the ruined skyline. The cost of courage was written in every scar, every loss, every breath, held tight in the face of death. But in the eyes of those children, in the warmth of these dogs, Ivan found the reason to fight on. For hope. For love. For the promise of a tomorrow where the sky might once again be clear. The Astrasira won. The days after the hospital bombing blurred into a haunting haze for Ivan. The weight of what had happened pressed on him, not just physically, but deep inside where memories and pain tangled. Each morning as dawn broke over the battered city, Ivan found himself rising before the sun. Luna and Arko were always there, steady, unwavering. Their presence was the only constant in a world turned upside down. But the scars ran deeper than the rubble. The faces of the children, the nurses, the families, they haunted him. He remembered the little boy, the one he carried out from under the beams. His eyes wide with terror, searching for hope in a place where it was almost lost. Ivan's fingers clenched into fists. How many more, he whispered to himself. Back at the makeshift command center, Ivan joined his team around a rough wooden table. Maps were spread out, littered with pins and notes. Every mark a place of loss or hope. "We can't keep reacting," said Oksana, a medic whose gentle hands had saved countless lives. "We have to be proactive, find ways to protect people before the bombs fall." Lewin nodded, eyes on the map. "Luna and Arko can help," he said quietly. The dogs were more than companions, they were lifelines. Their ability to detect explosives, find survivors, and even comfort the broken made them invaluable. Oksana smiled softly. "They're our angels." That afternoon, Ivan took Luna and Arko out for training in the ruined outskirts of the city. The sun was harsh, but the dogs worked tirelessly, noses to the ground, alert to every scent. Ivan watched them with pride and pain. Each task they performed was a fight against despair. Suddenly, Arko stopped, ears pricked, body tense. He barked sharply and darted toward a collapsed building. Ivan followed, heart racing. Underneath a pile of bricks, the faint sound of breathing caught his attention. "Stay calm," he urged, calling to the trapped person. Luna joined Arko, helping move rubble as Ivan dug frantically. Minutes stretched like hours. Then a small hand emerged. A young woman, eyes swollen from tears, looked up at him. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely audible. Ivan's heart swelled. But even in moments of hope, the shadow of war loomed. That evening, as Ivan returned to base, news came of a new strike, this time, a school shelter. Children had been evacuated, but some were still missing. Ivan clenched his jaw. "Not again," he muttered. He gathered his team and prepared for another night mission. As darkness swallowed the city, Ivan, Luna and Arko moved like ghosts through the ruined streets. The silence was broken only by distant explosions and the soft padding of paws on cracked pavement. At the shelter, Ivan called out softly. Luna and Arko sniffed the air, leading him to a collapsed wall. Inside, the cries of frightened children echoed. Using every ounce of strength, the team worked to free the trapped. Luna's nose led to a small boy buried but alive. Arko stayed close, offering warmth and comfort. One by one, they pulled survivors from the rubble. Each rescue was a spark of light in the endless night. Hours later, Ivan sat by the fire, exhaustion heavy in his bones. Luna curled beside him, her warmth a balm. He reached down, stroking her head. "We're making a difference," he said softly. She looked up, eyes bright with trust. Ivan closed his eyes, finding strength in their bond. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new fears, but as long as Luna and Arko were by his side, there was hope. The city was cloaked in an eerie silence, as Ivan's team prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. Reports had come in that a large weapons depot had been hit, and multiple unexploded ordnance was scattered across a densely populated residential area. Every second counted. Ivan's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his gear. Luna sat alert beside him, eyes sharp and focused. Arko paced restlessly, sensing the storm ahead. "Be ready," Ivan whispered, voice tight with tension. "This is unlike anything we've faced." As they approached the devastated neighborhood, a low rumble vibrated through the ground. The faint crackle of distant gunfire was punctuated by sharp, sudden blasts. Smoke curled from burning buildings, casting ghostly shadows over the debris. Ivan's breath caught in his throat. "This is a war zone," he muttered. Luna suddenly stiffened, ears pricked forward. She bolted toward a pile of rubble, barking urgently. Ivan sprinted after her. "Luna, wait," he called, heart-pounding. But she ignored him, pouring frantically at a small crushed crate half buried beneath the dust. Arko joined her, growling low. Ivan's mind raced. Explosives, he wondered. Before he could react, a sudden explosion erupted nearby, throwing him backward. Pain exploded in his side. Dust and debris filled the air. Ivan coughed, violently disoriented. Luna and Arko were already moving tirelessly, pulling survivors from the wreckage despite the chaos. With every breath, Ivan fought to stay conscious. His eyes met Luna's. She licked his face gently, her warm presence anchoring him to reality. "Stay with me, Ivan," she seemed to say. Gathering his strength, Ivan forced himself to stand. The mission was far from over. Nearby, a terrified child was trapped beneath a concrete slab, crying out in pain. Ivan pushed through the dust and rubble, determined. "Hold on, we're coming," he shouted. Luna and Arko worked in perfect harmony, guiding rescuers to the boy. Sweat and tears mixed as Ivan and the team carefully lifted the debris. Minutes felt like lifetimes. Finally, the child was free, coughing, trembling, but alive. Ivan cradled the boy, heart pounding. Suddenly gunfire erupted from a nearby alley. Ivan's instincts kicked in. "Get down," he yelled. Bullets tore through the air, some striking the ground near them. Luna growled fiercely, positioning herself between Ivan and the danger. Arko barked loudly, warning of approaching enemies. Ivan ducked behind a ruined car, clutching the child close. His hands shook, but his mind was razor-sharp. He knew they had to move fast. With Luna and Arko leading the way, Ivan navigated the maze of destruction. They darted through narrow alleys and crumbled buildings, the sound of pursuit close behind. The city felt alive with danger, every shadow a threat. But Luna's keen nose and Arko's protective stance kept them one step ahead. Finally, they reached a temporary safe zone, a cluster of tents and medical aid stations. Ivan handed the child to the medic's relief, flooding his body. He sank to the ground, exhaustion overwhelming him. Luna lay beside him, her steady breathing, a reminder that they had survived the firestorm together. In that moment, Ivan knew this war was far from over. But as long as he had Luna, Arko, and the strength to fight, hope would never die. The first light of dawn crept cautiously over the shattered cityscape, casting long shadows over the ruined streets where Ivan and his canine team had spent the night. Exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone, soldiers, medics, survivors alike, but the war showed no mercy. Caustically, Ivan sat alone on a cracked concrete slab, his back against a cold wall. Luna rested her head gently on his knee, her dark eyes filled with unwavering loyalty. Arko lay close by, muscles tense, alert even in rest. For the first time in weeks, Ivan allowed himself to feel the crushing weight of it all. Tears, bitter and silent, pricked at the corners of his eyes. He thought of the child they had saved just hours before, the terror in those little eyes, the fragile hope now flickering inside. The hospital bombing, the school shelter, the endless danger. It was a relentless storm. How much more, he whispered, into the cold morning air. His hands trembled, and Luna nudged him softly as if to say, "You're not alone." Suddenly a crackle came from the radio, a sharp, urgent voice breaking through the stillness. "Commander Ivan, we've just received intel, a new threat spotted near the Eastern District. Reports say a convoy carrying explosives is moving through civilian zones." Ivan's heart clenched. The nightmare wasn't over. With renewed urgency he rose, Luna and Arko immediately at his heels. His team was already assembling, faces grim, but determined. They knew the stakes. If those explosives fell into the wrong hands, or detonated accidentally, countless lives would be lost. Ivan's grip tightened on Luna's leash. "We go now." "No mistakes," he ordered. The convoy was close. Ivan's team moved swiftly, using every scrap of cover to advance. The air was thick with tension. Suddenly from the shadows, a barrage of gunfire erupted. Ivan dove behind a toppled wall, heart pounding, the sharp staccato of bullets ringing in his ears. Luna barked fiercely, charging forward despite the danger. Arko followed, growling a deep warning. Ivan scrambled after them, yelling orders. His mind was a whirlwind: protect the convoy, secure the explosives, save the civilians nearby. He spotted movement, a small figure darting through the chaos. A child. Without hesitation, Ivan lunged forward, catching the boy just as a grenade exploded nearby. The blast threw them both to the ground. Pain seared through Ivan's side, but he clung tightly to the child, shielding him with his body. Luna and Arko sprang into action, barking, biting, defending their team and the innocent child. Gunmen were closing in. The dog's courage was fierce and unyielding. Ivan's vision blurred, but the warmth of Luna's body pressed against his was a lifeline. In the deafening chaos, Ivan's world narrowed to a single truth: they had to survive. For the city, for the children, for hope. As reinforcements arrived and the attackers were pushed back, Ivan looked down at the child, cradled in his arms. Exhausted, bruised, but alive. Luna licked his face gently. Arko's eyes met Ivan's, a silent promise. They would fight through the darkness no matter the cost. The war was far from over, but this family of fighters, man and dogs, were ready. Together they would bring light to the shadows. The sun dipped low, casting a warm golden glow over the battered city. The war still raged beyond the horizon, but here in this small moment of calm, something precious was about to happen. Ivan carried the young boy from the last mission, a fragile spark of hope, cradled in his arms, through the winding paths of the camp. Luna and Arko walked beside him, alert, yet calm, their fierce loyalty shining brighter than ever. Ahead, a woman stood waiting, her eyes scanning the approaching figures with a mix of dread and desperate hope. Her hands trembled as Ivan came closer, the boy stirring slightly in his arms. "Mum," the child whispered weakly, his voice barely more than a breath. Tears welled in the woman's eyes. She dropped to her knees, arms wide open. "I thought I'd lost you," she sobbed, clutching her son to her chest. Ivan watched silently, the ache of all he had witnessed softened for a moment by this reunion. Luna nudged his hand, resting her head gently against his leg, a quiet reminder that even in the darkest places love and hope endured. The camp's makeshift clinic buzzed softly with activity, but here in this circle of reunion, time seemed to stand still. The boy's eyes flickered with gratitude and relief. His mother held him tightly, whispering promises of safety and love. Ivan felt a warmth spread through his chest, a fragile light against the cold, harsh reality of war. This was why they fought, for these moments, for families reunited, for the chance to rebuild from the ashes. As the mother thanked Ivan, tears streaming down her face, he looked toward Luna and Arko. Their eyes met his, fierce and proud. Together they had saved a life. They had saved a family. In the war-torn city, amidst loss and pain, this reunion was a beacon, a promise that even in the darkest night, hope would find a way. The war still cast its long shadow over the city, but a fragile hope was beginning to bloom amid the ruins. Ivan stood atop a small hill, overlooking the battered skyline. Luna and Arko, at his side, their silhouettes framed by the soft light of dawn. The sounds of conflict had quieted, now replaced by distant murmurs of rebuilding, whispers of peace. Ivan's heart was heavy with memories, the lives lost, the battles fought, but also filled with gratitude. They had endured. Together man and dogs had faced the horrors of war, and emerged not broken, but stronger. He knelt, stroking Luna's fur gently. "We made a difference, girl." Arko wagged his tail, eyes bright and fierce. Their bond was unbreakable, a testament to the power of courage, loyalty, and love. In the distance, children's laughter echoed faintly, a sound Ivan had not heard in months, a sign that life, no matter how fragile, would carry on. As the sun climbed higher, Ivan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight was not over, but with Luna and Arko by his side, he was ready for whatever lay ahead. "Well, keep fighting," Ivan said softly, voice steady. "For every life, every family, every hope." The dogs barked once, a clear, confident call to a new day. Together, they stepped forward into the light. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If you were moved by Ivan, Luna, and Arko's story, please like, share, and subscribe to support more inspiring tales of courage and hope. And don't forget to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories too.